She dropped the tray. Not because she was clumsy, not because she was tired. She dropped it because the man sitting at table 7, the man with the scar above his brow and the cold eyes that once made her feel like the only woman alive, was supposed to be dead, or at least gone forever. Roman Vescari, the man who vanished 5 years ago without a single word, and now he was here, in her restaurant, ordering whiskey, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't spent 5 years raising his daughter alone. If this story already has your heart racing, subscribe right now, drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments, and don't you dare leave before the end. Let's see how far this story travels. The shift started like every other shift. Celine. Arden tied her apron in the employee bathroom, stared at herself in the mirror for exactly 3 seconds, no more, no less, and told herself the same thing she said every night before walking out onto that floor. You are fine. Ivy needs this job. Keep your head down. 3 seconds. Then move. She had been doing that for almost 2 years at Aurelio's, one of those Manhattan restaurants where the menu had no prices, and the lighting made everyone look like they were already famous. The kind of place where men in suits whispered deals over plates they barely touched, where women in diamonds laughed at jokes they didn't find funny, where the staff was supposed to be invisible. Celine had mastered invisible. She was good at it. She was good at a lot of things she never expected to become good at, surviving on 4 hours of sleep, making a hot meal from almost nothing, reading Ivy a bedtime story in a voice that didn't shake even when she wanted to cry. Invisible was easy compared to all of that. She pushed through the kitchen door at 7 sharp, picked up her section assignments, and started the night. Table 1 couple. Anniversary easy. Table 3 corporate table 8 men. Heavy drinkers big tip if she stayed invisible. Table 7 reserved. VIP. Manager Franco had already warned everyone. No mistakes at table 7 tonight, Franco had said, straightening his tie like he was about to meet the president. The Vescari party. Celine had nodded without looking up. The name meant nothing to her then, or so she thought. The first hour was controlled chaos, the kind she was used to. Orders flying, plates moving, the low roar of conversation layered over the jazz quartet in the corner. Celine moved through it all on autopilot, her body knowing the choreography, even when her mind was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere like the daycare pickup tomorrow, or the electric bill that was 2 weeks late, or the way Ivy had looked at her that morning over a bowl of cereal and asked with 4-year-old seriousness, "Mama, why don't I have a daddy?" Celine had answered the way she always answered, "You have me, baby. That's everything." Ivy had accepted it. She always did. But the question never stopped landing like a stone in still water. She was refilling the water glasses at table 3 when she heard it, a different kind of silence cutting through the noise, not an absence of sound. A shift in it, the way a room changes when someone powerful walks in. She didn't look up right away. She told herself it was nothing. But then Franco appeared at her elbow, practically vibrating. "Table 7 just arrived," he whispered. "Go, now. Your best work, Celine. Your absolute best." She set down the water pitcher, smoothed her apron, turned, and the world dropped out from under her feet. There were 4 men at the table. She registered 3 of them in a blur, broad shoulders, expensive suits, the specific stillness of men who were used to being dangerous in public. But the fourth one she had known in another life. He was sitting at the head of the table with the kind of ease that didn't belong to a man. It belonged to something older and more permanent, like a building or a mountain. His suit was dark, perfectly cut, and he wore it the way armor is worn. His jaw was set. His hands were flat on the white tablecloth, and above his left brow, cutting through his hairline, a scar she had never seen before. 5 years had done something to Roman Vescari. They had taken the boy she loved and replaced him with someone she didn't recognize, except his eyes. His eyes were the same, dark still and looking directly at her. She stopped walking. She couldn't remember stopping, but she had. She was standing in the middle of the floor with the order pad in her hand and 4 words playing on a loop inside her skull. "He is right here," One of the men at this table said something. She didn't hear it. The jazz kept playing. The other tables kept going. The whole restaurant breathed normally while Celine stood at the edge of her own personal disaster. It was Roman who broke it. He didn't stand. He didn't wave. He just said her name quietly, precisely, like it was something he had been saving. Celine. And God help her, every wall she had built in 5 years cracked right down the middle. She walked to the table. She didn't know how. She just did. Her feet remembered how to move before the rest of her caught up. "Good evening," she said, and her voice came out steady. She was proud of that, fiercely and privately proud, the way you're proud of things no one will ever know you had to fight for. "My name is Celine. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with drinks?" One of the men said something about bourbon. Another one asked for sparkling water. Roman said nothing. He was watching her. Not the way men sometimes watched her in that restaurant, calculating, impersonal. He was watching her the way someone watches a person they thought they'd never see again, like she was both proof of something and the cause of something. "And for you, sir?" she asked, meeting his eyes for exactly 1 second before looking back at her notepad. "Whiskey," he said. "Neat." She wrote it down. She walked away. She made it all the way to the service station before her hands started shaking. Franco appeared beside her. "Everything okay? You went pale out there." "Fine," she said. "I know one of them. Old acquaintance. It won't be a problem." Franco's eyes narrowed. "Old acquaintance. That's Roman Vescari Celine. I know who he is. Do you—" Franco lowered his voice to something urgent and uncomfortable. "Because he is not just a businessman. Word is that man runs half of what runs this city, the quiet half. You understand what I'm saying?" She understood exactly what he was saying. She also understood that the man in that dining room was the father of her daughter and that he had no idea. "I'll handle it," she said. Franco didn't look convinced, but he stepped back. She returned to table 7 with the drinks balanced on a tray, and her composure rebuilt one breath at a time. Roman's men talked among themselves, low, abbreviated conversations she wasn't meant to catch. She set down each glass with precision, working around the table. When she reached Roman, she set his whiskey down and started to step back. "You cut your hair," he said. She stopped. 3 years ago," she said without looking at him. "Is there anything else I can get for the table?" "Sit down." The table went quiet. She looked at him, then really looked at him. "I'm working." "I know you are." His voice hadn't changed. That was the cruelest thing about it. After everything, after 5 years of nothing, his voice was exactly the same. 5 minutes. "I don't have 5 minutes." "Celine." He said it differently this time, not a summons, something closer to a plea. "Please." She hated that word coming from him. She hated that it worked. "I'll check back in 15 minutes. She said to the table, to all of them, professionally, neutrally, and walked away again. She lasted 12 minutes. She handled 2 other tables, dropped off a dessert order, consulted briefly with the kitchen about a lamb dish, and spent the remaining time in the walk-in cooler, pressing her wrists against a cold shelf and telling herself that whatever she was feeling, it was manageable. It was not manageable. She thought about calling her neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, who watched Ivy on late nights. She thought about asking Franco to reassign table 7. She thought about a lot of things she knew she wasn't going to do. Because the thing no one tells you about the people who wreck you, the real ones, the deep ones, is that they don't lose their power over you just because they leave. They just go dormant, like something waiting under ice. And all it takes is one moment of eye contact in a restaurant on a Tuesday night to crack the whole surface open. She went back to the table. The other men had ordered. She took the food requests efficiently, kept her eyes on the notepad, and was almost clear of it when Roman spoke again. "How long have you been working here?" 2 years. "And before that, other places." She looked at him. "Is this relevant to your order?" Something shifted in his expression. Not softness exactly, more like a door opening in a wall she hadn't known was there. "You look tired," he said. Of all the things he could have said to her, apology, explanation, justification, anything, he chose that. And it was so accurate, so casually observant, that it hit her somewhere unguarded. "Thank you," she said flatly. "Can I get you anything else?" "The scar," one of his men said suddenly. "A big man, quiet until now. Boss got it 2 years ago. Ambush. He almost didn't make it. "No one asked you," Roman said without raising his voice. The man went quiet immediately. Celine kept her expression neutral. But inside, something she'd been holding in a specific shape for 5 years shifted slightly out of place. It went on like that for the next hour and a half. Every time she came to the table, Roman found a way to say something that wasn't technically a conversation, but functioned like one. A question about the menu that wasn't really about the menu. An observation about the restaurant. A single sentence that landed between them like a stone she had to step around. And every time she walked away, she felt his eyes on her back until she was out of his sight line. His men noticed. She could tell by the way they avoided looking at her directly, the specific avoidance of people who have been briefed. He told them about me, she thought, or they figured it out, or both. That thought made her feel something between terror and fury in roughly equal measure. At 9:40, the table finished their meal. The other men drifted toward the bar. Roman did not. He sat alone at table 7 with his second whiskey and waited. Franco came to her with a look that said, "Whatever you need to do, please do it quickly and cleanly." She went to the table. "Can I bring you the check?" she asked. "Sit down, Celine." "Roman, I'm not going to make a scene." He said it quietly. "I'm not going to cause you any problems here. I just need 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. 5 minutes." She looked at the empty chair across from him. She looked at him. 5 years ago, she had loved this man so completely, it had rewritten the architecture of who she was. And then he had vanished. No call, no letter, no explanation, nothing. She had spent the first year waiting, the second year grieving, the third year learning to be angry. Years 4 and 5, she had been too busy surviving and being a mother to feel much of anything toward him at all, or so she had told herself. She sat down. 5 minutes, she said. "Then I need to close my tables." He nodded, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was Roman who finally broke it, and when he did, his voice came out rougher than it had all night, like something he'd been pressing flat for a long time, finally pushing back. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," he said. "I need you to know that." "Roman, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything tonight. I just need you to know that what happened, I didn't choose it. Things happened that I can't explain right now, not here, but I never wanted to leave you." She looked at him, at the scar, at the suit that cost more than her monthly rent, at the hands that were clasped on the table now with a tension that was the only thing about him that looked uncontrolled. "You had 5 years to find me," she said. "Do you understand that 5 years?" "I know." "Don't tell me you couldn't. I was right here. I never left New York. I was in the same city." "I know that too." "Then why?" He looked at her with something in his eyes that she didn't have a name for, something that looked almost like grief. "Because coming back meant you'd be in danger," he said, "and I couldn't do that to you." She laughed a short, private, humorless sound. "Danger," she repeated. "You left me alone without a word and called it protection." He didn't argue. He absorbed it. "I know," he said again, and somehow that was worse than any defense. She stood up, smoothed her apron, looked down at him for one moment, this man who had been everything and then nothing, and was now sitting in her section 5 years too late, and she said the sentence she hadn't planned to say, the one that had been sitting in her chest all night like a match point. "I have a daughter," she said. Roman went very still. "Her name is Ivy." Celine continued, her voice dropping to almost nothing. "She is 4 years old." She watched it happen. She watched the moment the math landed. She watched Roman Vescari, who had walked into that restaurant with the controlled gravity of a man who feared nothing and no one. She watched him come completely apart. Just for a second, just one unguarded, unarmored second. His hands unclenched on the table. His jaw moved without producing sound. His eyes changed in a way that had nothing to do with power and everything to do with something raw and ancient and lost. 4 years old, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. He looked at her. And what she saw in his face in that moment, she would carry it with her for a long time after, because it wasn't what she'd expected. It wasn't guilt exactly. It wasn't shock exactly. It was the look of a man who had just realized the full weight of everything he'd missed, everything that couldn't be given back. "Celine, I have tables to close," she said, and she walked away. Behind her, she heard nothing, not a word, not a sound, and somehow that silence was the loudest thing in the room. She didn't sleep. She knew she wouldn't before she even got home. She'd known it the moment she stepped out of Aurelio's into the cold and stood on the sidewalk for 30 seconds, just breathing, just trying to locate herself inside her own body again before walking to the subway. She got home at 11:40. Mrs. Okafor was asleep in the armchair with the television running the way she always was on late nights. Celine paid her, thanked her, quietly locked the door behind her, and went to Ivy's room. Her daughter was sprawled across the mattress, the way only children sleep completely without reservation, one arm flung out and her mouth slightly open. Her hair was everywhere. She was wearing the pajamas with the little foxes on them that she'd picked out herself at the thrift store 3 months ago and had refused to stop wearing since. Celine stood in the doorway for a long time. She was looking for Roman in Ivy's face the way she sometimes did when she was tired enough to stop protecting herself from it. The jaw, maybe. The way Ivy's brows sat straight and serious even in sleep. The stillness. She found him. She always found him. She pulled the blanket up over Ivy's shoulder and went to the kitchen and sat at the table in the dark and didn't move for a very long time. The sentence she had said to him kept playing back, not in the dramatic way she might have once imagined it. No music, no lighting, no moment of triumphant revelation. Just a plain fact delivered in a restaurant, standing beside a cleared table, apron still on. "I have a daughter. Her name is Ivy. She is 4 years old." And then she had walked away. She had walked away because she was terrified of what came next. Because she'd seen his face in that moment, really seen it, and it had not looked like the face of a man who was going to disappear again. That was the part that kept her up until 3 in the morning. Not that Roman Viscari had come back, but that he looked like he intended to stay. She got through the next morning on coffee and momentum. Ivy woke up at 6:30, announced that she was hungry, declared that she did not want the oatmeal accepted. The oatmeal, and then spent 20 minutes telling Celine about a dream she'd had involving a purple elephant and a very rude frog. Celine listened to every word. She asked the right questions. She laughed in the right places. She was present for all of it, in the way that mattered, the way you learn to be present when you're also holding something enormous inside your chest, and there is no space or time or safety to put it down. She dropped Ivy at daycare, hugged her a second longer than usual, and was halfway back down the block when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She stopped walking. She knew before she even looked at the screen the way you know certain things in your bones before your brain catches up. She answered it. "You shouldn't have this number," she said. "I have most numbers," Roman said. "How are you?" "How am I?" She said it back to him flat, like she was checking that she'd heard him correctly. "You're asking how I am." "I'm asking how you are." "Roman, I told you last night that you have a 4-year-old daughter, and you're calling me the next morning to ask how I am, like we're old colleagues." A pause, short, controlled. "I didn't sleep. Neither did I." "I need to see you." "No. Celine, I said no." Her voice came out harder than she intended, but she didn't soften it. "Not yet. You don't get to walk back into my life and start setting the pace. That's not how this works." Another pause. Longer this time. "You're right," he said. She hadn't expected that. She'd expected pushback leverage, the kind of quiet insistence she'd seen in him all night at the restaurant. Not agreement. "I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything," he continued. "I know that. But I need you to understand that I'm not going to pretend last night didn't happen. I can't do that. I'm not asking you to pretend anything. I'm asking you to give me space." "How much space?" "I don't know yet." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is she healthy?" Celine closed her eyes. Of all the questions he could have asked of everything he might have wanted to know, he asked that first. And it undid something in her that she wasn't prepared to have undone. "Yes," she said. "She's healthy." "Does she—" He stopped, started again. "Does she know anything about me? She knows she has a father. She doesn't know who." "What does she think?" "She thinks he's gone." A beat. "She's for Roman. She's not asking complicated questions yet, but she will." He said nothing for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lower, like something had shifted in his chest. "I want to fix this," he said. "I know I can't fix what I took from you, but I want to fix what's still fixable." "You can't fix a child's first 4 years." "I know that." "You can't give her back a father who was there." "I know that too." "So what exactly are you fixing, Roman? What is it that you think you can walk back in and repair?" The silence stretched between them. "I don't know yet," he finally admitted, "but I'm not leaving again." She wanted to tell him that wasn't reassuring. She wanted to tell him that showing up was the easy part, and she had no reason to believe he understood that. She wanted to say a dozen things that were true and sharp and deserved. What she said was, "I'll call you," and she hung up. She stood on the sidewalk for a full minute with her phone in her hand, and the cold working its way through her coat, and something that felt terrifyingly like hope sitting in her chest where she absolutely did not want it. She didn't call him that day, or the next. On the third day, something happened that made the choice for her. She came home from her shift at Aurelio's, a normal shift. No VIP tables, no impossible encounters, just the ordinary brutal grind of the job, and found an envelope under her door. No name on the outside, no return address, just a plain white envelope unsealed with a folded piece of paper inside. She knew before she opened it. Inside was a single paragraph handwritten and a key. "The apartment on the 4th floor of your building has been secured for a rotating security detail. You will not see them unless you need them. The key is for a new deadbolt. Marcos will install it tomorrow morning between 8 and 9. You don't have to talk to him. You don't have to acknowledge any of this. I just needed you and Ivy to be safer than you are. R." Celine read it twice. Then she walked to her door, checked the existing lock, came back to the table, and sat down. She should have been angry. She told herself she was angry. She picked up her phone to call him and tell him in very clear terms that he did not have permission to arrange security for her building or replace her locks or make decisions about her life without asking. She held the phone. She thought about Ivy. She thought about the way Roman's men had sat at that table, the specific stillness of people who knew exactly how much danger lived in the world because they were part of it. She put the phone down. She hated that she put it down, but she left the key on the table and went to bed. Marcos came at 8:15 the next morning. He was a large man, quiet, with careful eyes, and the practiced politeness of someone trained to be unobtrusive. He installed the new deadbolt in 11 minutes, tested it twice, handed her a second key and said, "Mr. Vescari wanted me to tell you you can call him directly, anytime, if anything feels wrong, anything at all." "Tell Mr. Vescari," Celine said pleasantly, "that I appreciate the lock and I'll be deciding everything else on my own." Marcos nodded once. "Understood." He left. Ivy appeared from the hallway, rubbing her eyes. "Who was that?" "A man who fixed the door." Ivy examined the new deadbolt with serious 4-year-old scrutiny. "It's shiny," she said. "It is." "Can I turn the key?" Celine handed it to her. Ivy turned it 4 times in alternating directions with tremendous satisfaction, then handed it back and wandered toward the kitchen asking about breakfast. Celine stood at the door with the key in her hand, and the weight of everything she wasn't telling her daughter pressed against the back of her throat like something she'd swallowed wrong. She called Roman that evening. "You can't do things without asking me first," she said before he could speak. "The lock?" "I know what the lock is. I'm not talking about the lock. I'm talking about the pattern. You deciding what I need. You arranging things without asking. That's not how this works." "You're right," he said. Again. She was starting to find his agreement more unsettling than his pushback. "Stop agreeing with everything I say." "I agree with you when you're right." "Roman." "Celine." And then quieter. "I'm trying to do this the right way. I don't know what the right way looks like yet. I'm figuring it out." She sat down on the couch, pulled her knees up, stared at the wall. Why is your world dangerous right now? What's actually happening? A pause. There are people who would use anyone close to me to get to me, he said carefully. That's as much as I can tell you right now. That's not enough. I know, but it's the truth of where I am. He paused again. You and Ivy being unprotected, I couldn't leave that alone. I know you didn't ask for it, but I couldn't. She pressed her fingers to her forehead. I want to meet her, he said. So quietly she almost missed it. Everything in her went still. Roman, not now, not tomorrow, whenever you decide it's right. I'm not pushing a timeline. His voice was controlled, but underneath it she could hear something that sounded almost like desperation wearing very good clothes. I just need you to know that I want to. When you're ready. If you're ever ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for that conversation. Then I'll wait. Don't say it like that. Don't say it like you're being noble. You missed 4 years, Roman. You don't get credit for waiting a few more weeks. He took that. He didn't fight it. You're right, he said. Stop saying that. What do you want me to say? I don't know. Her voice cracked just slightly, just enough to embarrass her. She pushed past it. I don't know what I want from you. I don't trust you. I want to be clear about that. I do not trust you. I know. And Ivy is my daughter first. Whatever happens between you and me, she is mine first. She's mine too, he said, firm, not aggressive, just true. I know I have no standing to say that right now, but it's still true. She's mine too, Celine. The words landed differently than she'd expected, not as a challenge, as something more complicated than that. As a fact she couldn't argue with from a man who hadn't been given the chance to earn it, but was claiming it anyway, not out of entitlement, but out of something that sounded, God help her, like grief. She didn't answer for a long moment. I'll think about it, she finally said. That's enough, he said. For tonight, that's enough. She hung up and sat in the quiet of the apartment, listening to Ivy's soft breathing from the next room, and something she didn't have a name for moved through her. Not forgiveness, not trust, not anything that simple. Just the terrifying, undeniable, unwelcome recognition that Roman Viscari, being back in her orbit, was going to change everything. And she had no idea yet if that was the worst thing that had ever happened to her, or the beginning of something she wasn't brave enough to name. The invitation arrived 4 days later. Not a phone call. An actual card, heavy cream stock, embossed lettering hand-delivered by a woman in a dark coat who appeared at Aurelio's during Celine's lunch break and asked for her by name. The Hargrove Foundation Annual Charity Gala, 8 o'clock, black tie, and beneath the printed text in Roman's handwriting, I need you there, not as a waitress, as yourself. I'll explain why when I see you. Please, Celine. She turned the card over, turned it back. Franco appeared at her shoulder, saw the card, and went visibly pale. Is that a Hargrove Gala invitation? He asked. Apparently. Those are invitation only. They're not Celine, they're not given to... He stopped himself, reconsidered. Who sent you that? She slipped the card into her apron pocket. An old acquaintance, she said, and walked back to her tables, but her hands, she noticed, had stopped shaking, and that somehow scared her more than anything else. She said no 3 times before she said yes. The first no came the same evening she received the card. She texted it one word, clean final, and put her phone face down on the kitchen counter and made Ivy's dinner and told herself that was settled. Roman didn't respond. No pushback, no argument, no second message. Just silence, which was, she discovered, considerably harder to dismiss than a fight would have been. The second no came 2 days later when he called and she picked up. She still couldn't explain to herself why she kept picking up, and he explained in a calm and measured voice that there were people at that gala she needed to be aware of. People whose connection to him also meant a potential connection to her, whether she wanted it or not. He wasn't asking her to come for him. He was asking her to come because it was safer to be inside the room than outside it, not knowing what was being discussed. That sounds like a threat dressed up as an invitation, she said. It's not a threat, it's the truth. I wish I didn't have to tell you this way. Then don't tell me at all. Leave me out of your world, Roman. That was the whole point. You're already in it, he said, and his voice was quiet and absolutely certain. You've been in it since the night I walked into Aurelio's. I didn't put you there, I was trying to keep you out. But these people saw me look at you that night. That's enough. That's all it takes. She sat down on the edge of the bed. What are you saying? She asked carefully. I'm saying the safest place for you that night is next to me, in public, where the rules of conduct still apply. And if I don't go, he paused, just long enough to tell her the answer before he said it. Then I'll have protection on you anyway, but you'll be doing it without information, and I'd rather you had both. She hung up. That was her second no. The third no happened internally on a Thursday afternoon when she was folding laundry and caught herself thinking about what she would wear, and then immediately furiously folded a towel with such aggressive precision that Ivy looked up from her coloring book and asked if Mama was mad at the towels. No, Celine said. The towels are fine. But she knew by then that she was going. She hated that she knew. She hated the reason she knew, not the security argument, which was real and frightening and probably true, but the other reason, the one that lived underneath all the sensible justifications, the one that had been there since the moment Roman walked back through a door she thought was closed forever. She still wanted to understand what had happened. She still, God help her, wanted the full truth. And she knew herself well enough to know that she would not find peace in avoidance. She called Roman on Friday morning. I'll come, she said, but I need 3 things. Name them. 1, you tell me everything before we walk in. Not after, not during, before. I need to know what I'm walking into. Agreed. 2, Ivy doesn't know anything about this. Whatever happens that night stays separate from her completely. Of course. 3, she stopped. She'd thought about this one the longest. You don't introduce me as anything. Not a friend, not a colleague. You let me be anonymous until I decide otherwise. A pause. That's going to be difficult, he said. People will already be watching. I don't care what's difficult for you. Those are my terms. Another pause, then agreed. She hung up. She stood in the kitchen. She pressed both hands flat on the counter and took 3 slow breaths. Then she called Mrs. Okafor to ask if she could watch Ivy on Saturday night. He sent a car. Of course he sent a car. It arrived at 7:15, black and quiet, with a driver who introduced himself simply as Cole and did not make small talk, for which Celine was privately grateful. She had borrowed a dress from her co-worker Diana, black floor length, simple enough that it didn't look borrowed, and done her hair the way she used to before waitressing, and single motherhood had reclassified certain things as luxuries she didn't have time for. She'd stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long moment before leaving, not admiring herself, just checking. She looked like someone who had not always been this tired. That would have to be enough. Roman was waiting outside the venue, not inside, not at the top of some grand entrance, but on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching the car pull up with an expression she couldn't read from a distance and could read too well up close. He looked at her the way she'd been afraid he might look at her, like she was still the most important thing in his line of sight, like 5 years had done nothing to that particular fact. She got out of the car and walked toward him and stopped at a professional distance. You look, he started. Don't, she said. Tell me what I need to know. He looked at her for one more second, then he nodded. There's a man named Dorian Voss inside, he said, low and direct. He runs a rival operation. He's been trying to find pressure points on me for 2 years. He doesn't know about you yet, about Ivy, but if he sees us together tonight without context, he'll start digging. So what's the context? Old friends, nothing more. You came as a guest of the foundation, not of mine. I'll cross paths with you naturally. We don't arrive together. We don't leave together. We arrived together. You arrived by car. I was already here. A slight pause. The distinction matters to the people who track these things. She looked at him. You've been planning this. I've been thinking about your safety. Yes. You've been thinking about the optics. Both, he admitted. In my world, they're the same thing. She didn't like that answer, but she understood it, and she disliked that she understood it. Who else do I need to know about? A woman named Petra Callum. She'll approach you. She approaches everyone new. She's not dangerous directly, but she reports back to people who are. Be polite, be vague, don't give her anything personal. What does she look like? Red hair. She'll find you before you find her. She's good at it. He paused. And there's one more thing. What? If anything feels wrong tonight, anything at all, you find me immediately. Don't wait. Don't try to handle it. Just find me." She looked at him steadily. "You're genuinely worried about tonight." "I'm always worried," he said. "I just manage it better in some situations than others." It was the most honest thing he'd said to her since he came back. Not because it was a revelation, but because it was an admission that beneath the control, beneath the tailored suit, and the dangerous men, and the quiet authority he wore like a second skin, Roman Vescari was carrying something heavy, had been carrying it a long time. She didn't soften toward him for it, but she filed it away. "All right," she said, "let's go." The room was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing she'd been prepared for. There were people there who existed in a different layer of the city, the layer that made decisions that trickled down into the lives of people like Celine, without those people ever knowing where the current started. Politicians with careful smiles, financiers who laughed too comfortably, and underneath the charity veneer, something she could feel but not see a different economy running parallel using the same language. She took a glass of champagne she didn't intend to drink and found a position near the edge of the room where she could watch. She saw Roman move through the crowd with the fluency of someone who belonged, completely greeting people, exchanging the specific kind of handshake that contained entire negotiations, deploying warmth and distance with surgical precision. He was extraordinary at it. That was the thing she hadn't expected. She'd expected to see him uncomfortable in this world performing it. Instead, he wore it like skin. That unsettled her more than the danger briefing had. Petra Callum found her 20 minutes in. Red hair as promised. A smile that was genuinely warm and completely untrustworthy, not because it was fake, but because it was real and also strategic, which was somehow worse. "I don't think we've met," Petra said, extending a hand. "Petra Callum. I know almost everyone here, which means you're either wonderfully new or wonderfully mysterious." "Celine," she said, just the first name, just as Roman had coached. "I'm a guest of the foundation." "Are you involved in the work?" "I'm interested in it." Petra smiled, pleased, probing. "What do you do?" "Hospitality," Celine said. "True enough, vague enough." She watched Petra's eyes do the quick calculation that people do when they're categorizing someone, checking which box, which tier, which level of relevance. "How lovely," Petra said in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. "And how did you come to be invited tonight?" "A friend," Celine said. "I'm sorry, would you excuse me? I see someone I need to catch." She moved away before Petra could respond. Her heart was beating faster than she wanted it to, not from fear, from focus, from the specific alertness of being in a room where she didn't know the rules and the stakes were real. She found a quiet corner and checked her phone. Text from Mrs. Okafor. Ivy had eaten all her dinner, demanded a second story, and was now asleep. A photo attached Ivy on the couch with her fox pajamas and her arms wrapped around her stuffed rabbit. Celine looked at the photo for 10 seconds. Then she put the phone away and straightened her spine and turned back to face the room. Roman reached her at the 40-minute mark. He approached casually the way you approach someone you've spotted across a room and wandered toward with no particular agenda. The performance was seamless. She had to give him that. "Petra talked to you," he said quietly, standing beside her, both of them facing the room. "For about 2 minutes. I gave her nothing. She'll report that you were evasive." "Good, let her report it." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're good at this." "I'm good at reading rooms. I've been a waitress in places like this for 2 years. You learn who the dangerous ones are pretty fast." He turned his head slightly toward her. "Who's the most dangerous person here tonight?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked at the room. She thought about it honestly. "The woman near the bar in the blue dress," she said. "She hasn't smiled once. Everyone else is performing. She's just watching." Roman was quiet for 3 full seconds. "Her name is Elise Vance," he said. "She's a federal prosecutor. She's been building a case against Dorian Voss for 14 months. A pause. "You identified the right person." Celine looked at him. "You didn't know she was here tonight?" "No." "That surprises you?" "Yes." His jaw tightened briefly. "It does." She watched him recalibrate, watched the calculation happen behind his eyes, fast and thorough. Whatever he'd expected from tonight, it had just shifted. "Roman," she kept her voice low, "how much trouble are you in right now?" He looked at her, and the answer in his eyes before he controlled his expression again was enough. "Tell me," she said. "Not here. Then we need to leave. We can't both leave at the same time. Then I'll leave first. 20 minutes, then you follow. Tell me where." He looked at her with something she couldn't categorize, surprise maybe, or recognition, like he was seeing something in her that he'd forgotten was there. "There's a car waiting on the east side of the building," he said. "Cole will take you somewhere safe. I'll be there within the hour." An hour. "I need to speak to 2 people before I leave. If I leave without speaking to them, it signals something I can't afford to signal right now." She searched his face. 1 hour, she said. 1 hour. She started to move away. He caught her wrist, not hard, barely a touch, just enough to stop her. And when she looked back, his expression was stripped of the performance for just a moment, just a second of something completely unguarded. "Thank you," he said, "for coming tonight. I know what it cost you." She looked at his hand on her wrist. He released it immediately. 1 hour, she said, and walked away. She was almost to the exit when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to a charity gala. Sharp, controlled, coming from the east corridor. Then a second one, and the room changed not all at once, but in a wave the way panic moves through a crowd when the body understands something before the mind catches up. Someone near the bar said a word she didn't hear clearly, but she heard the next word. Gunshots. The room broke open. People moved toward exits, away from windows into each other, voices layered over voices. Someone knocked a table glass, breaking that clean, sharp sound underneath everything else. Celine stopped moving. She was 10 feet from the exit. She could leave. She could go right now, get to Cole, get away from whatever this was. She turned around. Roman was still in the room. She could see him across the chaos, standing completely still while everyone else moved his head, turning with a controlled precision that told her he was already assessing, already tracking, already somewhere she couldn't follow. His eyes found hers across the room. He pointed at the exit. Hard, unambiguous. She shook her head. His expression shifted, not anger, something sharper than anger, something that looked like fear for the first time since she'd known him. He started moving toward her. She stayed where she was, because she had looked at the room the way Roman had taught her, without knowing he was teaching her, watching, categorizing, tracking. And she had seen something in the 30 seconds since the shots that she was almost certain Roman hadn't seen yet. Dorian Voss was not running toward the exits with everyone else. He was moving toward the staircase at the north end of the room, calm and purposeful, with one of his men flanking him. And the federal prosecutor, Elise Vance, was following him, alone, without backup, without anyone else knowing. Celine grabbed Roman's arm the moment he reached her. "Voss," she said into his ear, "north staircase, right now, and the prosecutor is following him." Roman turned, looked. She watched his entire face change. "Get to Cole," he said. His voice was iron. "Now, Celine, not a discussion." "I know, go." He looked at her for one fraction of a second. Something in his eyes she wasn't ready to name. And then he moved fast, and certain cutting through the chaos toward the north end of the room. Celine turned and walked directly to the exit. Her hands were completely steady. That was the thing that surprised her most about herself in the car afterward, sitting in the back seat while Cole drove and the city moved past the windows. She'd been inside a room where shots were fired. She'd seen Roman Vescari transform from a man into something older and colder in real time. She'd given him information that had mattered, and her hands hadn't shaken once. She didn't know what that said about her. She pressed her fingers flat on her knees and watched the lights go past. Her phone buzzed. "Roman. You're in the car." Her yes. "Roman. Good. I'll be there in 40 minutes. She looked at the message. 40 minutes instead of an hour. She didn't ask why. She just watched the city and breathed and thought about Ivy in her fox pajamas, asleep and safe and completely unaware that her mother had just navigated the edges of something enormous. The phone buzzed again. Roman. "You were right about Voss and about Vance." She stared at the screen. Then she typed, "I know." And then before she could stop herself, "Are you okay?" 3 seconds passed. 4, 5. "Roman. I am now." She put the phone face down in her lap. Outside Manhattan kept moving indifferent, enormous, full of its own invisible wars. And Celine Ardan sat in the back of a car she hadn't chosen to be in, heading toward a conversation she hadn't planned to have, feeling something she absolutely refused to call relief. But it was relief. God help her, it was. Roman arrived in 38 minutes. She knew because she'd been watching the clock on her phone with the specific focus of someone who needed something to track other than their own thoughts. Cole had parked outside a building she didn't recognize, not her neighborhood, not anywhere she'd been before, and told her quietly that Mr. Vescari had a private floor here, that she was safe, that she could go up or stay in the car, her choice. She went up. The apartment was not what she expected. She'd built something in her mind, something that looked like power made physical cold and impressive and deliberately intimidating. Instead, it was quiet. Sparse in the way that suggests someone who travels too much to accumulate things. A couch, a table, books stacked in no particular order, a coffee mug left near the sink that hadn't been washed yet. That mug undid something in her guard she hadn't meant to lower. She was sitting on the couch with her shoes off and her arms crossed over her chest when she heard the door. Roman came in the way he always moved, now contained, scanning the habits of a man whose alertness never fully switched off. He saw her on the couch. Something in his face shifted, the operational tension dropping by a degree, just one like a door giving slightly without opening. "You waited," he said. "I said I would." He set his jacket on the chair, loosened his tie, sat down across from her. Not beside her. Across far enough to give her space, close enough to talk without performing a conversation. She looked at him directly. "Tell me everything. Not the version you've been calibrating. The actual truth." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "How much do you want to know? All of it. Some of it will change how you see things." "Roman." Her voice was flat and patient and finished with preamble. "I have spent 5 years not knowing. I am done with partial information. Tell me everything or tell me nothing, and I'll make my decisions based on nothing. Those are the options." He nodded, and he told her. He'd been 26 when it started, not a choice so much as a gravity, the kind that pulls you in before you understand its name. His family had roots in things she'd never known about, structures that predated him by 2 generations, and when the man who'd been running the Vescari operation died, the line of succession was not a conversation. It simply happened. "I was with you," he said. "I was trying to find a way out of it. I was genuinely trying. And then Dorian Voss made a move against my uncle, against the people around me, and it became clear that anyone I was connected to was a target, not a hypothetical, a real immediate target." "So you left?" "I left because staying meant you were in the crosshairs. The people Voss was using at that time, they were not rational actors. They didn't negotiate. They sent messages through the people around you." He said it without inflection because the inflection would have broken something. "I couldn't let you be a message." Celine was quiet for a moment. "You could have told me," she said. "If I told you, you would have stayed. You would have tried to help, and you would have been killed for it." He looked at her. "You know I'm right." She hated that he was right. She felt the truth of it land in her chest and hated every inch of it. "So you disappeared," she said. "You let me believe you just stopped wanting me. You let me spend a year waiting and 2 years grieving, and you just—" "Yes." He didn't qualify it, didn't soften it. "Yes, I did that. Because you being angry at me was survivable. You being dead was not." She stood up. She needed to move. Sitting still with that much feeling in her body was physically impossible. She walked to the window, pressed 2 fingers against the cold glass. "I found out I was pregnant 8 weeks after you left," she said. Her voice came out steady, and she was distantly proud of it. "I sat in a pharmacy bathroom with the test, and I thought he'll come back. Something happened, but he'll come back. I waited another 6 weeks before I accepted that you weren't." She heard him behind her. She heard the specific silence of a man receiving something he can't fix. "I named her Ivy because it was the only name that felt like it could hold," she continued. "Because ivy grows on its own. It doesn't need anything to lean on. It just finds a way up." She paused. "I was telling myself something, I think, with that name. Celine." "I'm not done." She turned around. "I worked 3 jobs in the first year. 3. because I had no family support, no savings, no one. My mother had passed 2 years before, and my brother was overseas, and I was 24 years old and pregnant and completely alone in this city. She let that sit. I am not telling you this so you feel guilty. I'm telling you so you understand what the gap actually looks like from inside it. It wasn't just time, it was specific days, specific nights, specific moments where I needed someone and there was no one. Roman sat very still. His jaw was set. His eyes hadn't left her face. "I know," he said. His voice was rougher than it had been all night. "I know, and I can't—" He stopped. Started again. "There is nothing I can say that accounts for that. I know that." "No," she agreed. "There isn't." The room held the weight of it between them. Not dramatically. Not with any of the heat of the early part of the evening. Just two people sitting with a truth that was too large and too real for anything but stillness. It was Roman who spoke first. "Tell me about her," he said, quiet, almost careful, like the words were something fragile. "Tell me about Ivy." She didn't plan to. She'd told herself she wouldn't, not tonight, not until she'd had time to think clearly about what information she was willing to share and when. But she was tired, and he had just told her the truth. And Ivy was the best thing she had ever done with her life, and some part of her, the part that had spent 4 years parenting alone with no one to marvel alongside her. Some part of her was just tired of holding all of it by herself. "She is the funniest person I have ever met," she said. "She's 4, and she is genuinely funnier than most adults. She has opinions about everything. She told me last week that the color green is trying too hard. I don't know where she gets this." Something in Roman's face, the locked, controlled surface of it, fractured slightly, just at the edges. "She's stubborn," Celine continued, "completely, immovably stubborn. Once she decides something, that's it. I have no idea where that comes from either." She looked at him pointedly. "None," he said, and there was something in his voice that sounded like the first genuine thing she'd heard from him, fragile, and almost like laughter, and entirely heartbroken all at once. "She collects things," Celine said. "Rocks, mostly. She has a specific box for them. She assigns them names and histories. The gray one is apparently named Gerald, and he's been through a lot." Roman pressed his hand briefly over his mouth, the gesture of a man trying to hold something in. "She asks about her father," Celine said more quietly. "Not constantly, but she asks. And every time she does, I give her the same answer, that her dad had to go somewhere, but that she's loved. And she accepts it the way kids accept things, which is completely and temporarily, and then she asks again 3 weeks later." Roman's hand dropped from his face. He looked at her with something completely unguarded. "I want to meet her," he said. "I know I've said that before, but I need you to understand that it's not about claim or right or any of that. He stopped. "I just want to see her. Once. Even from a distance. I want to know what she looks like when she's not a photograph I'm imagining." Celine looked at him for a long time. "You've been imagining her?" "Every day since you told me." She believed him. That was the problem, she believed him, and believing him made everything more complicated and nothing simpler. "I need more time," she said. "I know. I need to trust that you're not going to disappear again, and I don't trust that yet. I know that too. And Roman," she held his gaze, "your world, what happened tonight, the shots, Voss, all of it, that cannot be Ivy's world. I don't care what the situation is. She does not grow up inside that." "She won't." "You can't promise that." "I can promise that I will burn down every structure I have built before I let anything from my world touch her." He said it without drama. Just fact. The specific register of a man who had already decided something and was now reporting it. "I have been working for longer than you know toward a position where I can step back, where the people under me can run it without me at the center. I'm not there yet, but I'm closer than I was." She absorbed that. "How much longer?" "I don't know. Honestly. 6 months. A year. Maybe longer if Voss keeps applying pressure. And until then, I keep you and Ivy as far from the visible parts of my life as I can manage while still being present. I don't ask for public acknowledgement. I don't put my name on anything connected to you. He exhaled. I just want to be in the orbit, even at the edges of it. Celine stood up and walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water and stood at the sink, drinking it slowly, her back to him. Thinking. Actually thinking, not reacting, not protecting, but genuinely working through the architecture of what he was proposing. Behind her, he waited. He was good at waiting when he needed to be. She'd noticed that about him, the patience of someone who had learned that forcing things had consequences. She turned around. "If you meet Ivy," she said carefully, "it's not as her father, not yet. Not until she's old enough to understand what that means, and I've had time to prepare her." He nodded. "If you meet Ivy, you meet her as a friend of mine, a person I trust. Nothing more until I decide otherwise." Agreed. And the moment anything from your world touches her life, this ends. All access, all contact, everything. I will take her somewhere you won't find us. He looked at her for a moment. "I'd find you." "Roman." "I would. I'm being honest." He held up one hand. "But I would never use that. I'm telling you because I don't want to start whatever this is with something false. You should know exactly what you're dealing with." She stared at him. "You are the most complicated person I have ever known," she said. "I know. That wasn't a compliment. I know that too." She almost smiled. She stopped herself. But it was close enough that she saw him notice it, and she saw what it did to his expression, the specific devastating effect of almost being smiled at by someone who has every reason not to. "I'm going home," she said. "Cole will take you." "I know." She picked up her shoes. "Roman." She said his name and waited until he looked at her with complete attention. "If you do this, if we try to build something manageable out of this disaster, you do it on my timeline, my pace, my terms, not yours." "Yes," he said. "And you tell me the truth. Everything from now on. No calibrated versions, no information management. If something is happening that affects me or Ivy, I hear it first." "Yes, I mean it." "I know you do. That's why I'm agreeing." She held his gaze for one more moment. Then she walked to the door, put her hand on the handle, stopped. "Her eyes," she said without turning around. "They're yours, exactly. Same color, same the way they go still when she's thinking. She doesn't know she does it, but I see it every day." She heard him make a sound behind her, small, involuntary. She opened the door and walked out. In the elevator going down, she pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes and allowed herself just for the 30 seconds of the ride to feel everything she'd been managing all night. The fear from the gala, the exhaustion of the truth-telling, the grief of the story she'd told about the first year, about the pharmacy bathroom, about the name she'd chosen because she needed to believe something could grow on its own. And underneath all of it, persistent and unwelcome and entirely real, the feeling of not being alone with it anymore. She opened her eyes when the elevator doors opened. She walked to the car. She went home to her daughter. 3 days later, on a Sunday afternoon in a public park with a wide-open sightline and Mrs. Okafor 2 benches away, as a precaution, Celine hadn't told Roman she'd taken it happened. Ivy was at the swings. She had demanded the highest swing, negotiated it with the kind of 4-year-old certainty that assumes the world will simply comply, and was now pumping her legs with total commitment, her hair flying. Roman stood 6 feet from Celine, hands in his pockets, watching. He hadn't spoken since they'd arrived. He'd barely looked at Celine. His entire attention was on the small person on the swing, this creature he had not known existed 2 weeks ago, and who was now the most important fact in his universe. Ivy slowed the swing herself, dragged her sneakers in the dirt to stop, and climbed off with the efficiency of someone who had somewhere more interesting to be. She spotted a collection of rocks near the path and immediately diverted toward them. She crouched down, examined one, picked it up and turned it over. And then, with the completely unself-conscious directness of a 4-year-old who has not yet learned to be strategic about anything, she looked up at the nearest adult who happened to be Roman and held out the rock. "This one's nice," she said. "You can have it if you want." Roman looked down at her. The most controlled man Celine had ever known. The man who had sat across from dangerous people in dangerous rooms without blinking, crouched down to 4-year-old level and looked at the rock in her outstretched hand. "What's his name?" he asked. Ivy looked pleased that he understood the right question. I don't know yet. He's new. She studied Roman with the frank assessment of a child. What's your name? Roman. Ivy repeated it to herself, testing it. That's a good name, she decided. Okay, his name is Roman too. She closed his hand around the rock with both of her small ones, the decisive gesture of a completed transaction, and then turned back to the path looking for the next interesting thing. Celine watched Roman stay crouched at that level for a moment after Ivy walked away. His head was down. His shoulders moved once, just once, with something he was controlling very hard. When he stood up and turned toward her, his eyes were clear. He'd managed it. But she'd seen the moment before, and she knew what it had cost him. He opened his hand. The rock sat in his palm, small, gray, ordinary. She gave me a rock, he said. His voice was completely level and completely wrecked. She does that, Celine said quietly. She decides you're worth something, and she gives you a piece of her collection. It's the highest honor she offers. Roman looked down at the rock. Then he closed his fingers around it. I'll keep it, he said. And Celine, watching him standing there in a public park holding a small gray rock, with both the reverence and the devastation of a man who understood exactly what 4 years stolen looked like. In the palm of his hand felt something in the deepest part of her chest make a sound like ice beginning very slowly, very unwillingly to thaw. She wasn't ready for that, but it was happening anyway. The rock sat on Roman's desk for 11 days before Celine noticed it. She noticed it because she had come to the apartment. His apartment, the sparse, quiet one with the unwashed coffee mug that had since been replaced by a different unwashed coffee mug, which she found oddly reassuring to talk through something practical. Ivy had started asking about Roman by name. Not the man from the park, by name. She had apparently decided with the sovereign authority of a 4-year-old that Roman was worth remembering, and she had been mentioning him with the casual frequency of someone slotting a new person into their existing world. She asked me this morning if Roman likes foxes, Celine said, sitting at the table across from him. Because she wants to know if she should show him her pajamas. Roman's expression did the thing it always did now when Ivy came up, a specific softening that he didn't try to hide anymore and probably couldn't have hidden even if he'd tried. What did you tell her? I told her I'd ask. He looked at her. Do I get to answer that in person? That's why I'm here. He went still in the way that meant something had landed that he hadn't expected. She had noticed over these past weeks of careful negotiated proximity that Roman Viscari was a man who expected difficulty. He had calibrated himself for resistance, for conditions, for the long, slow work of earning back something he'd forfeited. What he hadn't calibrated for was grace. Small, incremental, unannounced grace. It hit him harder than the hard things did. When, he said. Saturday, if you're available. I'll be available. It's not a formal introduction, she said immediately. It's just, she's already asking, and pretending you don't exist feels dishonest. She's 4, not an infant. She tracks things. I understand. She doesn't know who you are to her yet. That conversation happens later when I decide she's ready and when I decide I'm ready. Saturday is enough, he said. Celine, Saturday is more than enough. She looked at him across the table. Looked at the rock on the desk behind him, that small, gray, ordinary thing sitting in the exact center of an otherwise clear surface, like the most important object in the room, which she was beginning to understand it was. You kept it, she said. He glanced back at it, then at her. I told you I would. She looked at her hands. Roman, I need to ask you something and I need a real answer. Ask. The situation with Voss. After the gala, after whatever happened in that corridor, where does it stand? Because I've been letting you back into the edges of our life, and I need to know what I'm actually allowing in, not the managed version, the real version. He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that meant he was deciding how much of the real version to give her, and then correcting that instinct in real time. Voss is contained, he said, temporarily. What happened at the gala, the shots were a message, not an action. He was demonstrating reach, not executing anything. But Elise Vance following him into that corridor changed the calculus. She's building something that's going to move fast now, and when it does, it takes Voss off the board. And you, where does it leave you? Complicated, he said, but not in danger, not the immediate kind. What's the complicated kind? The federal kind. He met her eyes. I'm not the target of Vance's case, but I'm adjacent to it. There may be questions, conversations I'll need to navigate carefully. Celine absorbed that. Are you going to go to prison? He didn't flinch at the directness. No. I have lawyers who have been managing exactly this kind of adjacency for years. But I need you to know it's a possibility on the table, so you hear it from me and not from somewhere else. She pressed 2 fingers to her forehead. You're telling me there's a chance my daughter's father could go to prison? A small chance. And I'm telling you now before Saturday because you said you wanted the truth first. Always. She looked at him. She thought about the pharmacy bathroom 5 years ago. About the 3 jobs. About Gerald the Rock and the fox pajamas and the bedtime stories she'd read in a voice that didn't shake. About every night she'd spent assembling a life with her bare hands in this city alone because this man in front of her had made a choice she still wasn't fully done being angry about. She thought about the park, his hand closing around a small gray rock, his shoulders the one involuntary movement, the thing he'd controlled before she could see his face. Are you trying to get out? She asked. Actually trying, not eventually, not someday. Are you actively working toward it right now? Yes. Show me. He looked at her. What? Show me. Don't tell me you're working toward it. Show me what that looks like, what has actually changed in the last 3 weeks. He was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up, went to a drawer, came back with a document. He set it on the table between them. She looked at it, legal language dense several pages. Her eyes caught fragments. Transfer of authority, operational transition, his name and another name beside it, and the language of someone systematically removing themselves from the center of something. It started before you came back, she said, reading. Yes. Before you walked into Aurelio's. Yes, I had already started. He sat back down. I want you to understand that. I didn't start this because of you. I started it because I was tired of the weight of it and because I knew I had known for a while that this life was not the life I chose. It was the life that happened to me, and I wanted to choose something else. A pause. Finding out about Ivy made me move faster, but it was already in motion. She looked at the document, then at him. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay. She slid the document back across the table. Saturday, 3 o'clock. Don't be late because she has a hard stop at 5 for dinner and bath, and if her routine is disrupted, she becomes a small, extremely opinionated force of nature that I don't have the energy to manage. Something crossed his face that she was fairly certain was the closest Roman Vescari had come to genuine joy in a very long time. He kept it contained, but it was there. 3 o'clock, he said. And bring something small, not expensive. She doesn't care about expensive. She cares about interesting. Last week she was fascinated by a bottle cap for 45 minutes. A bottle cap. Don't overthink it. That's your first mistake with her. She's not interested in being impressed. She's interested in being curious. She paused. She gets that from me. She gets the stubbornness from me, he said quietly. Celine stood up, put on her coat, stopped at the door the way she always seemed to stop at the door in this apartment. One more thing, one more sentence, always one more thing left to say. Roman, she turned. Whatever happens with the legal situation with Voss, with all of it, you don't disappear again. That is the one condition that overrides everything else. No matter how dangerous it gets, no matter what you're trying to protect us from, you call me, you tell me, you do not vanish. She held his gaze. Because the second time would break something I wouldn't recover from. And Ivy would never recover from it at all. You understand me? He stood up. He crossed the room and stopped in front of her, not close enough to be a pressure exactly the right distance, and he looked at her with everything unguarded, all the control set aside, just the actual man beneath it. The one who had once been 23 and in love with her and terrified of what he was inheriting and had made the worst decision of both their lives with the most genuine motivation he had. I understand you, he said, and I need you to hear me say this once clearly so it's on record between us. He didn't touch her. He just held her eyes. I am not going anywhere. I will not disappear. I will call you before I make any decision that affects you or Ivy. I will tell you the truth, even when the truth is difficult. And I will spend however long it takes, months, years, however long, earning the right to be someone she calls her father. A pause. And the right to be someone you trust again. I know I'm not there yet. I know that's your timeline, not mine. But I'm telling you where I'm going, so you know. The room was very quiet. Celine looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. For the second time that evening, and with an entirely different weight, she opened the door, walked out, took the elevator down. She did not let herself feel it fully until she was outside on the sidewalk in the cold, that she had come to associate with the whole of this story, that first snowy night at Aurelio's and everything after. She stood on the sidewalk, and she let it move through her. Not forgiveness. She was honest with herself about that. It was not forgiveness yet, and might not be for a long time, and that was legitimate and real, and hers to determine on her own schedule. But something that felt like the first morning after a very long winter. Not warmth yet, just the first suggestion that warmth was possible, the light changing, the air carrying something different. She put her hands in her pockets and walked toward the subway. Saturday came the way Saturdays do, when you've been both dreading and needing something faster than you're ready for and slower than you can stand. Celine had not told Ivy much, just that Roman was coming to visit, that he was a friend, that she could show him whatever she wanted or nothing at all, completely her choice. Ivy had considered this information seriously, and then said, I'm going to show him Gerald. I think he'd like that. Gerald is very interesting, Ivy said with the confidence of someone who has never doubted this. Roman arrived at 2:58, 2 minutes early, which Celine understood as the maximum restraint he was capable of exercising. She opened the door and he was standing there in the hallway, in a jacket she hadn't seen before, less formal than his usual, deliberately so she could tell, and he was holding something small in his hand. She looked at it. It was a smooth, flat stone, pale blue, slightly translucent at the edges. Sea glass, he said before she could ask. I read that kids who collect rocks sometimes like sea glass too. It's not expensive. It's just, I found it at a shop. It seemed like something she might find interesting. Celine looked at the sea glass in his hand, then at him. Come in, she said. Ivy was in the living room performing an elaborate narrative with several stuffed animals that appeared to involve a kingdom, a disputed territory, and a diplomatic crisis among the toys. She looked up when Roman came in. You came, she said, as though she'd been expecting him and was mildly satisfied that he'd followed through. I did, he said. He crouched down, the same thing he'd done at the park, instinctively finding her level. You're Ivy. You're Roman, she said. I remember. I have something for you. He held out the sea glass. You don't have to take it if you don't want to. Ivy looked at the sea glass with absolute focus. She reached out and took it and held it up against the light, turning it slowly, studying the way light moved through it. It's blue, she said. It is. Where did it come from? The ocean. When glass goes into the ocean, the water and the sand rub the edges smooth over a long time, until it looks like that. Ivy looked at him with sharp, 4-year-old eyes. How long? Years. Sometimes many years. She looked at the glass again, then with the solemnity of a decision being made. I'm going to name her Marina. She closed her fist around it. Do you want to see my rocks? I'd like that very much, Roman said. Ivy stood up and grabbed his hand, not tentatively, not with the caution that adults use with new adults. Just grabbed it the way children claim things they've decided belong in their world, and pulled him toward the shelf where her collection lived. Celine stood at the edge of the room and watched. She watched her daughter explain each rock with absolute authority, the history, the name, the specific qualities that made it worth keeping. She watched Roman listen with a focus that was entirely real, asking exactly the right questions, never performing interest, but actually having it. She watched Ivy produce Gerald the gray one, who had been through a lot, and place him in Roman's hands with the gravity of a sacred object being transferred. She watched Roman hold Gerald with appropriate seriousness, and she felt something break open in her chest that she had no clean word for. Not love, not yet, not again, not like that, not today. But something in that territory, something in the same country as love, standing at the border of it, looking across. She went to the kitchen, made tea, gave herself 3 minutes alone at the counter. When she came back, Ivy was explaining a rock that was probably from space, and Roman was agreeing that this was entirely possible and they should not rule it out. Celine sat down on the couch and watched them. At 4:30, Roman stood up to leave, honoring the 5 o'clock boundary without being reminded which she noted, and filed away without comment. Ivy looked up at him. "Will you come back?" He looked at Celine. Celine gave him the smallest nod. He looked back at Ivy. "Yes," he said. "If your mom says it's okay, I'll come back." Ivy seemed to find this an acceptable and complete answer. She had already moved on, reabsorbing herself into the diplomatic crisis among the toys. She did not say goodbye. She said, "Okay, Marina is in my room now," as though reporting a logistical update, and that was that. Roman followed Celine to the door. They stood in the hallway, him on one side, her on the other, the door between them. "Thank you," he said. His voice was careful and low and carrying everything it wasn't saying. "She likes you," Celine said, "for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything." She looked at him. "Roman, she's going to love you. I want you to understand that that is what's coming. She's going to love you the way kids love people completely, and without conditions, and when that happens, you will be responsible for something more fragile and more important than anything in your entire operation. You understand that?" "Yes," he said, "I understand that." "Good." She put her hand on the door. "Same time next week." He looked at her. He didn't try to make it into something larger than she'd offered. He didn't push for more than Saturday afternoon and a child who had named her Sea Glass Marina and decided he was worth including. He took exactly what was given with both hands with all the gravity it deserved. "Same time next week," he said. She nodded, started to close the door. "Celine." His voice stopped her. She looked at him through the narrowing gap. "I know I don't have the right to say this yet," he said, "but I'm going to say it once, and then I won't say it again until you're ready to hear it." He held her gaze. "I never stopped. Not for a single day. I want you to know that." The door was almost closed. She held it there for one moment. "I know," she said, very quietly. "I know you didn't." And she closed the door. She stood on her side of it for a full minute. From the living room, she could hear Ivy narrating. Gerald was apparently being appointed to a senior diplomatic position in the Toy Kingdom, and Marina was to be his advisor, and the stuffed rabbit was voicing some concerns about the arrangement that Ivy was working through with great patience and authority. Celine pressed her palm flat against the closed door. She thought about 5 years. About what 5 years actually is when you live them. Not an abstraction, not a chapter in someone's story, but 4,380 individual days. Each one survived and shown up for and built into something that was, she could say this honestly without bitterness because it was simply true, something that was hers. Something real and good and made entirely by her own hands. She thought about what it meant that she was still here. That Ivy was here, that something Roman had set in motion before he even walked back through her door was slowly, carefully dismantling the world that had taken him from her. She thought about the fact that she was not the woman who had sat in that pharmacy bathroom at 24. Not because that woman had been wrong or weak or anything to leave behind, but because she had grown into something that woman couldn't have imagined yet. Something that had been built in the long, hard, quiet way that good things are built. She took her palm off the door. She straightened her spine. She went back into the living room, sat on the floor beside her daughter, picked up a stuffed animal, and asked what role she was playing in the kingdom. Ivy considered her. "You're the queen," Ivy said decisively. "You've always been the queen." Celine looked at her daughter, this fierce, funny, opinionated, rock-naming, sea-glass-collecting, utterly extraordinary small person she had made and raised and shown the world to and been shown the world by in return. "Okay," she said. And for the first time in 5 years, Celine Ardern was not surviving. She was living. And that all of that, every piece of it, the hard years and the truth-telling and the park and the sea glass and the door she'd just closed, and the one she hadn't decided yet whether to open, all of it was exactly, precisely, irreversibly hers.